meant to ask you actually. Are your gyms open yet, or are you still?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, no, they've been open for probably about 3 weeks. So
Nice.
it's been fucking brilliant to go back, to be honest with you. I mean, I get genuinely quite cranky if I haven't been to the gym for 2 or 3 days. Like I could feel this morning because I had my daughter on from Friday. So I didn't have obviously wasn't going to go on Friday. So I've had 3 days on the trot now where I've not gone, and I can feel how I start getting I get genuinely cranky. I feel like there's something rushing me if I don't go. So it's fucking brilliant going back. And my strength had dropped down quite a bit, but I got back up to about 325 on deadlifts, and I was back to benching about 250. So it's all right. I'll pick up. I'll hopefully pick things back up again, and it's good if you've been doing it for years. Your muscle memory kicks in and things like that. But yeah, it's been fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that it's open again. Generally speaking, like I said to you, over here they're not that bad with the lockdown. I think the problem in America is that everything has become politicized, including the lockdown. So I can see them dragging it out fucking ever in the States. Or if the Democrats win in November, it'll miraculously, the lockdown will lift on November the 4th.
Probably. Well, out here in Jersey and New York City and, the New York State rather, and, Connecticut, the virus is actually at a very low rate. And the gym, like the actual weightlifting type places are opening up tomorrow.
Oh, that's good.
But like the martial arts gyms, like the Muay Thai gym I go to has been open for about a month and, about 5 weeks or so. And that's been great. And, there's been some restrictions, like number of people. We were just doing, drills and like bag work and just now started doing pads again. And, but yeah, that's, it's been, I'm glad that actually everyone was cautious and took their time and everything. And, but yeah, it's been like a huge emotional, lift. With this being able to train again instead of just trying to do it by yourself is always rough.
Yeah, man, it's not the same. I had weights and stuff here at home, and obviously just light weights. Mm-hmm. But I try to, do, loads of volume and things like that. And, you kind of do continuous reps for 45 seconds or a minute or whatever. And it's just not the same. And I feel like if there's not people around me, indirectly or probably without them realizing, threatening to make me look like an asshole, I don't have as much motivation as I normally would have. So it's good when there's, if I go to the gym and there's some young punk standing next to me doing deadlifts, I'm like, old man has to show you how it's done.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. I'm glad that stuff's coming around. And like I said, things are pretty good in this part of the country. I mean, obviously, if I feel like there's we're on a powder keg right now, though. I just a lot of unease, very uneasy.
It's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's I don't know what my brain says one thing, my heart says another in terms of what the solution would be. But it's fucking terrifying what's going on there right now. And Tim Pool, who I really like, he said exactly the right thing a little while ago on his show. He said that his concern is now that the two sides have such opposing views of reality. There is literally no more middle ground. Like you've got these two extreme factions, and I think unfortunately a lot of people in the center that are just kind of sitting watching this, shaking their heads, going, "What in the fuck is going on here?" But those two extreme factions, like I said, they don't see eye to eye whatsoever anymore. They don't, and like I said, they have two entirely different interpretations of reality, and it's terrifying.
Yeah, and I had a very interesting talk with my mother yesterday, who is pretty conservative, but she's not a Trump supporter, and she's like against him, and she reminded me that my grandmother and grandfather were Democrats. And, my mother, I all these years, I thought my mother was registered as a Republican, but she's actually registered as an independent, which is like, this day and age is like, you can't vote in the primaries in this country unless you pick a party affiliation. You can only.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know if everyone should vote in the primaries. Really, you know what I mean? It's
No.
I don't know. Whatever. I don't want to get into politics, but it's just it's so intertwined with life over here right now that it's almost impossible not to talk about it.
That's the thing. I know. The thing for me, I mean, I'd always kind of, I guess been taught shut your mouth about politics and or keep your political views to yourself. And because a lot of my work kind of cascades over into the US, and actually will increasingly do because I'm just about to get promoted again, and I'm going to start looking after the US as well.
Oh,
So actually, the
congratulations.
good thing is, well, no, thank you. Well, the good thing is, I might actually once all the restrictions have lifted, I'll probably start traveling to the US at least for at least a week or so, once every quarter. So
Nice.
hopefully I can see you when I'm there. But the amount to which people discuss political stuff at work is also nuts because you can't really like I personally don't generally want to speak to a lot of people about politics because for the most part most people don't know what they're talking about. So for me, I try and steer clear of any conversations like that whatsoever, but it gets very difficult to because you keep getting put in a spot where you have to give an opinion, but you never know, who's listening. You never know who's going to take what you say the wrong way. It's just a fuck up.
Yeah, in general, it's better that I don't say anything at work about anything regarding religion or politics. It's like, I mean,
Yeah,
I keep my mouth shut. I do my job. I talk about, banal things, and mainly I just talk about work. And it's funny. I mean, I've been working, like I said, I've been working on and off for this company for the better part of, 15 years, maybe more than that. And I remember, and this was like, someone who was a senior level person who I actually had a really good relationship with. But he walked by my desk one day, and we would talk all the time, and on a friendly level. And he's like, Mike, I don't know anything about you, man. It's like, it's like you walk by other people's desks and you can see, well, this guy's a family man. He's got pictures of his family up there. This guy's into golf. He's got like a picture of him at a golf course, and this guy's into fishing or whatever. And it's like, I walk by your desk and there's literally nothing on your desk but just work stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm a quiet sort of guy. I don't want to, I just keep to myself, and it's. I think that's the only way to go, man, because our office was in New York City, and
yeah,
one of my coworkers who I actually spend a lot of time with and generally get along with really well is this right wing, like totally militaristic Trump supporter.
yeah.
And every now and then he just dips into this narrative, and I'm like, all right, guy, listen, man. You're way out in the fringes. I don't agree with anything you're saying, and I think let's just leave it at that. Let's just agree to disagree. And I said, the last person in this whole office you want to hear talk about religion or politics is me. So, let's just leave it
Yeah.
at that. You know what I mean?
But again, I've said this many times on my own show, and I truly believe this. I think if you took social media out of the equation, and you took the mainstream media out of the equation, and people sat down and they spoke to each other about what they think on specific topics or specific policy or specific ideas, I think a lot of people would realize that they have a lot more in common than they don't. I truly believe that, and because I'll be honest with you, I'm relatively to the conservative side politically speaking as well, but at the same time I believe in women's rights. So, I'm pro-abortion, I'm pro-marijuana legalization. I mean, I don't think that there are people in the world that are to the extreme of one side or the other, but for the most part, like I said, I think everyone wants to get to the same place. They just have slightly differing views on how to get there. And I kind of just wish that more of those types of people would be speaking up right now, because it feels like, and unfortunately, this is the nature of the press and the nature of social media. The fucking morons get their voices amplified, and everybody else gets told to shut up.
But the operative here is that being conservative in the UK is a little bit different than being conservative in Trump's America right now.
Yeah.
You know, it's conservatives. It's almost like a curse word here, man. It's almost like an entry out of like the Turner Diaries or something. If you're conservative, you know, it's like really. I mean, because
Yeah.
when you start seeing American flags and the word conservative and Republican, you start thinking about, you know, racism and these like fringe alt-right groups. And it used to not be that way when I was growing up. I mean, you know, of course, George Bush, no one liked him, but he was just a politician basically. You know,
Yeah.
obviously, I traveled abroad. I took a lot of shit because my country had George Bush as president. You know, and I get it, but you know, now it's like it really is like we're in this dystopian movie about an oncoming apocalypse, you know, and it's like
Yeah.
it's like you can't write fiction to match, you know, the story that's going on here in the United States.
How crazy things are. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. But like I said, I do think that I think a lot of this stuff is drummed up by the media. I mean, the amount of times that they've been, especially in the last couple of years, that CNN and Fox and MSNBC and everybody has been just caught outright lying or carrying water for the other side is fucking astounding. And there's too few people. And I think this is because I grew up in a place that was fairly divisive to begin with, and where you had a lot of misinformation spread by the media. So I've been trained from a young age not to believe anything that I hear. But you know, I think too few people question what they're hearing, and because they don't ever question it, they just then get stuck in their social media echo chambers, and that's what they believe until the end of time. There's very few people that when you actually you know, these people that are very quick to pick a political argument with you, as an example at work, when you actually start picking apart their arguments and what it's based on, very, very few people are going to be able to give you anything halfway intelligent. Like a friend of mine explained it correctly. It's like the average person, as soon as you put the squeeze on them, all you hear is talking points from whatever news they listen to. There's very few ideas of their own that they've got there, and very little is based on actual study, actual research of their own, and you know, them actually going, okay, based on all of the facts and all of the data that I could gather, here's my opinion on X. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's all emotional. It's all like, you know,
Yeah.
like shooting from the hip, a lot of emotional stuff, a lot of group mentality, you know, and I believe that it's been percolating for like the last 6, 7, 8 years in this country. Just with, you know, even it really is like almost architected in a way. It seems engineered to have this divisiveness. And it started way back with all of the call-outs and all this other kind of alienation around what people say, and you know, people being canceled and cancel culture in this country.
Yeah.
And that set the stage for, you know, the liberal, you know, snowflake. And then there's you know, the right wing, just a regular guy. I'm just like a working dude, you know, earn my living. I'm a little rough around the edges. Don't be so sensitive. You know, that division is really, in this country at least, how I feel like that has been in process for a really long time. And it's manifesting itself in our political conflicts right now. And it's just...
Yeah, and I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's insane.
It's terrifying. I've studied enough about war to realize that, or to know, and as I'm sure you have, that when people get to that point where you can no longer resolve conflict through conversation, you've got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, there was like this, you know, people were killed over the weekend in Oregon. You know, there was a protest and a counter protest, and it was just firing fucking tear gas at each other, and it was just crazy, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the West Coast, I mean, not to sound like a, you know, I've always been nervous in the Northwest, honestly.
Yeah.
I've always felt it's a wild country, man. It's, you know, a lot of very fringe ideas on both ends of the spectrum exist in Oregon as a state, you know, and I'm not surprised that that's where the most extreme stuff happens these days.
Yeah. The thing is, you know, people, you know, some folks in the media will talk about, you know, if Trump wins in November, you know, the West Coast might secede. But then you also think about it from a, you know, in terms of realistically what could happen, there's no way no one's going to secede in America.
No.
How do you split anything up? It's the same as people that say there'll be outright civil war. There won't be, because there's not two sides that are structured enough and organized enough to wage war against each other. But what you will have, I think, is ongoing civil unrest that'll get worse and worse and worse. And again, honestly speaking, like, I'm always on the side of people that I'm on the side of the person that abides by the rules, does their day job every single day, pays their taxes, abides by the law despite the fact that they don't enjoy it. I think that those people deserve to be able to live in peace and not be fucked with by a bunch of lunatics. In many cases, what I see in the States is a bunch of fucking spoiled middle-class white assholes running around pretend role-playing about stuff that they don't know anything about, really. Like, the vast majority of them, if the revolution that they are baying for actually came, they wouldn't know what the fuck has hit them. I think, from my perspective, I'd judge dread those people off the streets as soon as possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, that actually was demonstrated pretty clearly with what happened in Seattle with the Chaz. I don't know if you read about that.
Yeah. I mean, I did. No, I follow this very closely. So yeah, within a day, they've built borders. One person is dead.
Yeah, they created a fascist state.
I was about to say, they've got like a segregated area for African Americans. It was the most fucking insane thing ever.
Yeah, and that's like throughout history, that's the guys who are really good at overthrowing the government and like terrorism and stuff like that are usually not the people who can organize stuff and get things done, and keep the lights on and the food supply happening and the emergency services engaged. Those are not the same people, and unless you have a plan, I mean, that even happens in the Middle East, like when the United States goes over and they destabilize these governments, and then the people that take over are oftentimes worse than the powers that they just ousted. It's like a bunch of
100%.
warlords, and it's like an opportunity for these villains to step in and fractionalize everything, and that's like really what the end game is with a lot of this stuff. Is I'm afraid that people don't think that far in advance, and they just shoot from the hip, and they have all this emotion, and they'll fuck the police and all this, and and I'm the first one to admit that the cops have there needs to be some kind of police reform in this country. And a lot of times I question, I go, since when have the cops been cool? I mean, that's like the thing, man. I remember like as a kid, the police were not cool. Like you didn't, you were at odds with the cops. They were coming and they were breaking up, they were in LA in the 80s. The cops were like at war with like punk rock and everything. And I'm just like, yeah, man, like when were the cops like cool? The riots, they were the strong-arm fascists. And if anything, police have gotten more militaristic in their tactics here in this country. And, that's what I mean. It makes me laugh, all this support for the police. And I'm just like, man, what world did you live in where the cops were actually on your side? And that's not to say that I don't believe that we I don't think we don't need police. I think that we need some sort of like, public service, not jackbooted, stormtroopers. That's the thing. It's like there's a middle ground, I think, between all this stuff. And
well, I agree with you. I think there's definitely place for reform, and I think there's definitely place for the police to move toward a middle ground. But then at the same time, if I look at the statistics, I think in America, the police have something are in the vicinity of 320 million interactions with the public every year. My question around something like defunding the police is always, in the grand scheme of things, not looking at individual scenarios, but in the grand scheme of things, does defunding the police or lessening police presence or lowering the amount of training that police receive, is it going to make the public more safe or less safe? A lot of the studies I've read suggest that it's going to make them less safe. In places like Chicago, anytime that there's been an incident where somebody has been killed as a result of police brutality, they typically tend to find that the police as a whole withdraw from the public, and whenever that happens, crime spikes. You can, again, look at places like Chicago where they're already talking about defunding the police. The crime is fucking out of control there. I think Jocko Willink, again, he spoke about this on Joe Rogan, and he was right in my view. The police need more training, not less. It's a fucking tough job. If you're in a situation where you have to de-escalate gang violence, for example, and and I know from because we've done Muay Thai training. If you haven't sparred for 4 months and you step in with somebody who has, you're gonna get your fucking ass kicked.
Yeah, definitely.
So I feel like I agree with what Jocko was saying. He said these people should 2 days out of their work week should be spent training. They should be like muscle memory ready to be able to respond to a situation accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, like my criticism of the cops really is I agree there should be more training, and also they should be more discerning as to who they make cops, because that was my big thing. I learned that right quick. Like when I was younger, I used to work when I lived in Boston for a while, which is like one of the most racist, segregated cities you can imagine. I mean, it's like legit, like seriously, like crazy views about race in that city. And I had a job right down by the Long Wharf area in this office, and I would go to this sandwich shop to get lunch occasionally. And there was this like guy who would usually get your order wrong. He didn't know how to work the cash register. He was just kind of like this like moron, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And one day I went in there, and I overheard him talking to one of his coworkers about, oh yeah, my last day here is next Monday. I passed the exam to become a cop, and I'm like, wow, these are the kinds of fucking people that are becoming police officers. And I guess that goes into I'm not saying every single cop is like that, because I do know some cops. They're legit people. I don't, but if a guy like that can get on the police force in Boston, and you're going to give this guy a badge and a gun, there's a problem with the minimum requirements that you have. That's a job that you should have. Like, that's like the ultimate responsibility, man. You can't just give that job to some guy who can't work a cash register. I mean, I can't work a cash register either, but I also don't work in a sandwich shop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. But, again, then I come back to the question about defunding the police. If the police has less money to go around, are you going to be able to hire a better or low quality of policeman or policewoman? I tend to think that it's probably going to hurt the quality of people that you're able to deliver, be able to recruit. When you add on top of that the kind of social stigma that the media is creating around police, people in the police. In the UK, there's this saying that if the US sneezes, the UK catches a cold. It's kind of happened here as well. People are running around acting like the police is particularly violent and brutal here, which is just absolute fucking nonsense. And I've had dealings with the police in the UK on a couple of occasions, and I have to admit every single one of them was positive. There's not. I mean, I've not come across a single cop in this country that I stood back and went, "That guy's a fucking asshole."
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's a mixed bag. Now that I'm an older member of society and I don't look as threatening, I guess. Like, my interactions with the police is, I'm a white guy. I'm an older male. I guess I appear under certain aspects to be, kind of respectable. So the cops actually deal with me in a different way than they did when I was 19 years old. And that was a different world for me. And I'm, and being white in this country is a plus, a very big plus for you when you're dealing with the police, and that's a whole other ball of wax that's real. That's like something that's legitimately a problem in this country, is this systemic, I know it's a cliche, but it's true, systemic racism. It's like, it has been baked into the fabric of the United States, the history of my country is way, way shorter than, say, the UK. I mean, you guys have like the Roman Empire was part of, there's Hadrian's Wall, there's like castles in England, you know what I mean? Here we have like the oldest buildings here are probably like 300, 250 years old or something like that, And So the recency bias of all this stuff is, it's slavery and all this other stuff, and then the South and the freeing of slaves, and it being the way the South looks at it, more of like this economic sort of motivation, as opposed to this altruistic, freedom related angle that the North likes to see it, and it's like a lot of this stuff is coming to light these days, and I think that's positive, and I think that having to look at the reality of our country's history, or my country's history, in a modern light, I think is good. And I've talked about this before to my friends, where it's like, you remember like the Mayan calendar, that whole fear and all this stuff. How that was like, what, 2012?
Yeah.
And nothing happened in 2012. There was no cataclysm, like the Anunnaki didn't come back, or anything like that. But I'm going to say that I believe that something did shift that might have started back then that's manifesting now. And I think that a huge paradigm has shifted. And this might be, the whole year of the pandemic or whatever, and all the unrest that's going on, at least here, and actually worldwide. There's been a lot of other things happening. Might actually be some sort of reverberation of something that might have happened in like a long calendar. I don't know. That's just...
I don't think you're wrong. I think it feels like if anything else, COVID-19 was the switch to put everything in motion. I think you may have a good point there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was the movie There Will Be Blood. And I watched it again recently, and it's funny. It came out in 2007. If you were to press me and say when did There Will Be Blood come out, I would say 2014. Man, it came out like 13 years ago.
I know, it's crazy. You know why I think that it still feels so new is I think there's not been a movie where I've seen so much discussion and so much debate around a film as this. There's still to this day there's like articles being written about There Will Be Blood. A little while ago I read extracts out of somebody who'd done a university thesis analyzing the movie. So it feels like it's something that. In many ways, it's almost like The Sopranos recently did with the lockdown, where it really sort of picked steam back up again. I feel like the same happened with There Will Be Blood. It's a movie that's been studied by people more so than the vast majority of other films. So I hear what you're saying. It does feel very recent, and I'm going to place a caveat right at the start of this conversation and say, if anyone's looking for a nuanced or critical view of this movie, they're not going to get it from me. It's my favorite film of all time by not even just a slight margin. I treat this movie a lot like I would like my favorite album of all time. In that I can watch it over and over and over again, and I feel like I always take something new from it. I remember seeing it in the cinema for the first time, and I literally just sat there stunned through the credits. Everyone was leaving. I was staring at the screen. I was like, "What have I just seen?" And I watched it 3 times at the cinema, of which once was by myself, once with a friend, and once with a girlfriend at the time. And then I've probably watched it at least 30 to 40 times since, and I've not once walked away from the movie and not having thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a great film. It's an epic movie, man, and I feel like in a lot of ways it kind of harkens back to an older age of cinema that I hate to say it, but they just don't make movies like this anymore. You know what I mean? And
100%.
Yeah, it's got a great cast. Of course, Daniel Day-Lewis is a master craftsman when it comes to the craft of acting, and being another.
I was going to say about Daniel Day-Lewis. There's quite a lot to kind of unpack about his performance, but you mentioned that it was that it harkens back to an older golden age of Hollywood. One thing that's very interesting is one of the biggest influences on the film, and Paul Thomas Anderson has said this many times, was a movie from 1948 called The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which was by John Huston, as well as a James Dean movie called Giant.
Yeah.
And both have had a massive impact, not only on kind of the writing of the script, but actually how the movie ended up looking. They actually, in terms of the cinematography and the way that the film was put together, they used lenses, for example, that didn't have a zoom function to them or weren't able to support zoom functionality. They used very minimal lighting. They didn't do an awful lot of rehearsal. I think there's only one scene in the movie that was actually rehearsed and pre-planned. Everything else kind of had a loose plan for it, and obviously there was a script that they wanted people to stick to, but there's a lot of spontaneity that comes out, and that harkens back to a lot of those old films. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I wanted to mention that because in the run up to us recording this, I've probably been doing more studying about the movie than I might ordinarily have done.
I was going to say that particularly the most compelling scenes are the ones between Daniel Day-Lewis, his character Daniel Plainview, and Paul Dano as Eli Sunday, who plays two roles in this film. He plays his twin brother Paul, and he plays the Church of the Third Revelation.
Church of the Third Revelation, yeah.
It's like that just like a fire and brimstone Protestant, early American preacher, filled with the power of Jesus, and and those scenes in particular are gripping, in my opinion. There's so much, especially the scene when this is an interesting scene, the scene where Daniel Day-Lewis's character has to be baptized into the Church of the Third Revelation, and in order to get the blessing they're building a pipeline, and I found the pipeline aspect to be very interesting too, because he's like, we're building an oil pipeline, it's an 8-inch pipe, and I'm like, 8 inches? It's like that's like a very small pipe actually to be delivering petroleum. I found that to be very funny, but whatever. No one, maybe only a geek like me would really appreciate something like that.
Yeah.
Usually that pipe is like 40 inches diameter, multiple pipes, not just one. But so it's kind of a work that he agrees to be baptized. However, with all of his being compelled to admit to his sins, I felt like something real happened with his character when he's talking about abandoning his son and all this other stuff. And that scene was like one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, I thought, because it started in this like fantasy agreement of, I'm just gonna acquiesce to your wishes so that I get what I want out of this agreement. But in the actual environment of that scene where they're in the church and he's being compelled to admit his sins, and at this point, Plainview had murdered someone, he'd abandoned his son, he'd swindled people out of their land, lied, pretty much all of the major sins he'd committed, except for maybe adultery, because like there's a suspiciously absence of women really in this storyline, and I thought that was like one of the most intense scenes in the movie.
I agree. To me, that's one of the greatest scenes ever filmed. And speaking of discovering new things in a scene, I when I was watching that again last night, one thing that I noticed when he goes, and it ties into what you said about him experiencing something real while it's happening. But one thing I noticed is when he goes to sit down after he's been baptized and they're singing "There's power in the blood," the congregation, he appears to wipe his eyes. And at first I thought that's because he's wet from the water, but the way that he wipes his eyes, if you rewatch that scene, it looks like he's crying.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, it was the first, as I said, as many times as I've noticed it before, it's extremely subtle, but it's the first time that I noticed it there. Another subtlety that I noticed in in that scene is after he's been baptized, he stands up and he turns to Eli and he shakes his hand and he pulls him in close, and you can see him talking to him. Obviously, you don't hear what he's saying, and Paul Dano's character Eli pulls back a little, and he looks really kind of. he looks shocked, but he's almost kind of smiling as if to say, "Oh, you must be joking." And then right at the end of the film, when they're having the confrontation in the bowling alley, and he's yelling at him and he's going after him with a bowling pin, he says, "I told you I would eat you." And I thought to myself, like, that must have been, like, he was so furious about having that, very personal issue with his son thrown in his face in such a public way. That must have been what he effectively told him after the baptism, that, if you think you're going to get away with this, think again, kind of thing. And again, something I only noticed after a couple of viewings, but that's kind of the beauty of the film. So much of the movie is unsaid and subtle, but it kind of, like I said, it's like a great record. Every time you listen to it, there's something else that you pick up in it.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And let's talk about Daniel Day-Lewis's character, Daniel Plainview, for a minute, because I think that just a completely ego-driven, borderline personality psychopath that came from nothing. He starts off as a silver miner, a silver prospector, and just happens into the oil business, sort of by accident, pretty much.
Yeah.
And manifests his wildest dreams of wealth and power, and through that is able to build up this toxic ego which drives him forward through life. And there's a wake of destruction pretty much in his path. And ultimately at the end of the film, and he's murdered too. And so for him to kill Eli Sunday at the end of the film is like, okay, yeah, I eliminate people. Like this complete philosophy that has no consequences to his actions. And that's pretty much, and at the end, I think his final words were like, I'm finished, or I'm done, or something like that.
Yeah, he says, I'm finished.
I'm finished, yeah. And it's just like, I haven't actually read a whole lot of the dissection of this film. I just, enjoy it on my own. And I was, to me, it just, the movie is kind of like a testament to just the all-consuming greed, and how that, if that, unless that's tempered by something, be it a sense of morals or logic or compassion, just consumes the man and ultimately ruins that person.
I agree with you. It's kind of, he gets worse as he gets distanced from the things that keep him human in the movie. The thing that's so interesting about him is he's an incredibly complex character. So, if you start at the beginning of the movie and he has his fall down the mine shaft where he breaks his leg, Quentin Tarantino actually pointed out in an interview, because it's one of his favorite films as well. He said that there's a moment when he's crawled out of the mine and he begins crawling on his back to wherever he's going to go for safety, where the camera pans up and all you see effectively is wilderness. And he says that right there establishes everything about the character's psyche that effectively you need to know. That you have a man who is so driven and who has such a strong will that he is about to, if you kind of follow the vernacular of the story, he's about to crawl backwards on his arm with a broken leg for what seems to be miles to get to safety. And then, you kind of, obviously this sort of manifests in this competition that he talks about later on. But there are moments where he's shown to be very human. There's moments of real tenderness and real love between him and HW, his son, even though, HW it's intimated many times. And he says it at the end of the movie, he was only a cute face to help him buy land. But I think there's a lot of things in the movie that proves that not to be the case. He steps in and protects Mary Sunday from her father's beatings, because HW mentions that Mary's dad beats her if she doesn't say her prayers, and then there's this moment where he looks at old man Sunday and kind of mockingly tells him we don't hit kids anymore. So there is this human side to him, I feel like it gets what humanity is in him gets really damaged by the incident with the guy who pretends to be his brother, and he then finds out that he's been lied to. And it's almost like the con man has been conned, and that's what angers him so much. And then when his son wants to go his separate ways and leave the company at the end of the film, that's when the final bow breaks. And when he says, "I'm finished," it's kind of like I've defeated my last foe, being Eli Sunday, and really there's nothing left for me anymore. It's almost in many ways, because of the competition, I don't actually feel like money is even a motivator for him. Victory is the motivator, which is interesting because I've read a couple of studies around CEOs and around real kind of titans of industry and captains of industry, and a lot of them have borderline personality disorders, and for a lot of them, money isn't of any consequence. Money to them is just a number. It's winning the game that's the juice that makes the squeeze worthwhile. And I think he reflects a lot of that in his psychology and in his makeup in the film.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was never really that was the feeling I got too. Was that this guy definitely enjoys the fruits of his labor, but it's more even when he has that interaction with those other oil men, when he gets his son back and they're at that restaurant and his competitors show up, and he's fine. He's prospering with his pipeline, but he still had to have that one guy say that he made a fool out of him somehow, and the guy and the guy taking sort of the higher ground on that is like, okay, you made a fool out of me, so what? And I just thought, it's like he was so torn up and just completely bent over because of this grudge that he's been holding against these people for it seems like years. And it was all about the other guy yielding to him, and it wasn't really about, well, I'm happy now. I found another slight path, another passageway that I can go down with the pipeline that gave me great wealth, but it's not enough. It was it wasn't even that. It was that this other guy somehow perceived this other person besting him in a business deal, and it was such a slight,
It's the victory piece that comes into it. Like that competition is what drives him. When he has the argument with the guy from Standard Oil earlier on in the movie, and he tells him that he's going to come into his house one night while you're asleep and slit your throat. And then he says to him, you don't tell me how to raise my son. And then he stands up and he says, "I'll show you what I can do." And he turns around and he leaves. That's kind of the culmination of that. I think almost "I'm finished" is this admission that without competition, he's nothing. He's beaten his main rival. He sees his main rival as Eli Sunday, because one, he despises, religion, and he despises the church. He sees it as a con. Him being a con man himself, he recognizes another con artist in Eli Sunday very quickly, and he sees him as the biggest obstacle to him achieving everything that he wants. And again, I think one of the main messages that you take away from the movie is that, in spite of the fact that he has everything that he ever wanted, it's not fulfilling to him, because without the competition, he has no reason to exist.
Yeah, it's powerful, man. And I don't really know anyone who is at that level of success, but there are a few people that I know that are Wall Street people that just seem like the most miserable fucking people I've ever met in my life. Like, I've been to their homes, and they live in these nice, beautiful homes, but you can just see the dissatisfaction. And I'm not saying everyone who's successful is unhappy, but a certain type of personality gets drawn into that world, and it really almost isn't about money anymore. It's about, getting the better of somebody, like competition, like numbers, like things like that, Well,
he also admits, when he talks about having a competition in him, that, even though he's put this sweet face on everything and spoken of himself as an oil man and a family man, that he hates people, and that he sees nothing in people that he feels is worth liking. And he kind of, again, there's this strange dichotomy in his character, in that and it's an intentional one, but that he wants to be successful enough so that he no longer has to deal with people in any way, shape, or form, which is something I can frankly relate to on many in many occasions. But the further away he gets from people, and the further he gets away from his humanity, the more miserable he becomes, and the worse off he gets. It's interesting too. Paul Thomas Anderson actually filmed this movie as if he was shooting a horror. And he said the first character that he thought of when he was creating Daniel Plainview was Dracula. And there's a lot of very subtle hints at that in the movie. The first time that you see Plainview, for example, he's down a shaft and there's very little sunlight coming through. Later on when you see him in the mansion, he's kind of almost turned into something quite monstrous. And actually, when he's chasing after Eli in the bowling alley, he's all hunchbacked and he's moving in this really awkward way, which is presumably because he broke his leg. But he's taken on a very monstrous quality, which then therefore brings life to to Paul Thomas Anderson's idea of almost filming him as a monster. By the way, incidentally, that mansion that they filmed in, it's the same mansion that they used for The Big Lebowski. I didn't know that until I read something about it yesterday. They also used it for, I think the stables at that mansion was used for Eraserhead.
I had no idea. That's really cool.
Yeah. But I think the thing to me that's so incredible about the Daniel Plainview character, I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is a phenomenal actor, period. I've never seen him in anything where he's not incredible. But I think what makes this performance so exceptional to me is the extent to which he absolutely embodies the character. And it was interesting listening to how he went about creating the character. He spent, apparently after he read the script, he spent months doing what he referred to as ruminating intensely, where he would walk around and record bits of dialogue on a dictaphone that he would send to Paul Thomas Anderson. And that's, in doing so, he was beginning to find Daniel Plainview's voice, which in the film language is extremely important, and the inflection of his voice and the way that he speaks is very important. Then he started to look at how the character would dress, and apparently the one of the pivotal things for him was finding what Daniel's hat would look like. He wears 3 hats over the course of the movie, and obviously the one that he wears when he's successful, when he's a prospector, is kind of really stiff and smart looking. And then he said, like, the next piece was once he was comfortable with the character, was then taking that character and placing the character into the milieu of the movie and looking at how he would respond to other characters. So he says by the time that he got to that piece, he says he had to convince himself that Daniel Plainview was a real character first before he could convince the rest of or convince the audience that Plainview was real. And I feel like that, in that is kind of the magic of the character. If you could stick a ton of different actors into that role, and they could probably all do a relatively decent job, but not a single one of them, and that includes actors that I rate very highly. Not a single one of them would do with that character what Daniel Day-Lewis did to him. Which is to really turn him into, in my view, one of the most iconic characters, maybe of the last 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, when I first saw the film, I was like, was he a historical figure, Daniel Plainview? Was there actually a company, like, was he a real, like, historical person, like, that existed? And then I discovered that There Will Be Blood was based on an Upton Sinclair novel, Oil. And Sinclair wrote The Jungle, which was, I read that ages ago. And that actually started the safety regulations around manufacturing. That, like, the power of that book motivated, like, the formation of, like, organizations like OSHA in this country, because of people dying in industrial accidents and children working and all this sort of stuff. So then I realized that Plainview is a fictional character, but yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis really creates, like, an actual person when you're seeing him. You're not seeing Daniel Day-Lewis. You're seeing him, like, manifesting this other entity through his body and channeling it, and it's He's like that in pretty much every role I've ever seen him in. And I mean, even
Yeah,
like, Will Cutting in Gangs of New York, and another probably lesser known film, My Beautiful Laundrette. I don't know if you ever saw that.
yeah, I did.
Yeah, it's just he's completely different, like in every single role I've ever seen him play in. You know, convincing.
I completely agree, and I think convincing is the key word because, like I said, I think his approach to acting is very different. There was, rumors around the fact that he'd apparently built an oil derrick in his backyard and worked with that for 6 months. That apparently is nonsense. But the big thing was around the finding the voice. And I mean, like I said, his voice sounds so fucking cool. Like
Yeah,
in a weird way, it's kind of it almost in the way that the character charms the people of Little Boston in the movie, he's almost charming you the way that he is in the movie. I mean, I feel like in many ways he's written like an anti-hero because there are things where I feel like where I feel a kinship with him as well. And a lot of it is comes from a very personal place. I also grew up in a deeply devout Christian home, and I still think that some of the values are good values, but I remember being very young and seeing some of the same craziness that you see in There Will Be Blood and just feeling so much fucking, I wouldn't even say revulsion, but just detesting everything that I was seeing and feeling like every part of me could see it for the scam that it was. And I just hated it. And so like his approach to it and the way that this conflict between him and Eli escalates, it spoke to me on a level that I don't necessarily think the film intended, but I do think that that's the greatness of the character because again, it's not a black and white character. It's a character that there are parts of him that you can see and that you can relate to. I like some of the spite in his character as well. The scene where they're just about to start open the well for the first time, and Eli comes in and kind of demands in a fairly passive aggressive way that he be given an opportunity to bless the well, and that Daniel Plainview has to announce him as the proud son of these lands who tended his father's flock. And he turns around and he says he's got his little sister Mary Sunday with him, and he says the proud daughter of these lands.
yeah,
He blesses the well himself, and the look that he gives him when he does it, almost like go fuck yourself. And then he goes and opens the well. I mean, stuff like that I just fucking love, absolutely love it.
yeah. But that's also the ego that's creating it, making an enemy out of Eli, and then that statement right there probably cost him ultimately, and it's like his own folly really by doing that. But yeah, it's yeah, I appreciated his, and that's unusual. I mean, back then, I mean, religious freedom was like a big tenet, in early America, and even though this takes place in the later part of the 1800s. I mean, the country had only been in existence for a little over 100 years at that point, and everyone was some sort of Christian in that part of American history.
Yeah.
And for him to reject Christianity completely is like definitely unusual for that time period.
Especially rejecting it the way that he does, and again, you kind of that he sees Eli as the con artist when he's watched the first church service that he attends, and he looks at him and he says, "That was one goddamn hell of a show." He turns and he leaves. I mean, that to me, that's just fucking brilliant. It captures a lot of parts of the character that I can relate to. I mean, there's clearly stuff that I can't. I don't get angry at people and run after them with a fucking bowling pin. But as I said, I feel like he's very much written as an anti-hero in the same way that somebody like Michael Corleone was. Michael Corleone, if you break it down to kind of brass tacks, is a horrible human being, and yet there's something about him that's appealing when you watch The Godfather.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a good point because he is framed in the same way. Even like mafia films in general. They focus on characters like Don Corleone, Michael Corleone, Tony Soprano, like all these like horrible people, but they play up the humanity because people are complicated.
Yeah.
And the question I have too is, do you think that Eli Sunday believed any of the things that he was preaching?
I think there's no way for me to answer that without probably pulling on some of my own experience with people like Eli, and as I said, I've known many of them. I think to a degree he did, but I think he believed it to the degree that it excused any of his behavior. You know, especially later on in the movie when he talks about how God failed to inform him about the recent what I don't know what he refers to it as, but the recent tensions in the economy. And it's almost like I've gone out and squandered money the churches have provided me with, and got myself into a load of debt, and now I'm going to scam somebody's land out. Who's in my church. I'm going to scam them out of my land to sell to you, so that I can bail myself out of trouble. I feel like I said, I think he believes it to the point where it either enriches him or it helps justify his own weakness.
Yeah, I think in some ways Eli is like the shadow of Plainview. You know what I mean? They're almost motivated by the same things. Power, competition. Eli Sunday is a way more passive aggressive character than Plainview. Plainview will deceive you, but he's doing it aggressively. Where Sunday is more of a manipulator behind the scenes. And the religious aspect of this thing. I mean, I'm always interested in religion, like Christianity and all this other stuff. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I grew up in a Roman Catholic household, but I don't practice Christianity or any specific religion or anything like that. But having that being part of my my upbringing and learning about other, like the Protestant religion, who in the United States, they're into this like cathartic release and the blood of Christ bathed in the that all this really dramatic stuff. I think the catharsis of that makes people feel good, and I think that when he found God and found his path, basking in the glory of Jesus Christ, and he saw that he had a knack for, being Christ's instrument in their community. That's when his ego got tickled. And I think that ultimately led him. I mean, at the end of the film, you see him. He's got like this gold chain on with a cross on it, which I thought was he's got this like suit, and that gigantic cross around his neck. Like, when I first saw that, I mean, also growing up in, in the New York, New Jersey area my whole life, and being around Guidos, which probably aren't a thing in the UK.
No.
Seeing gigantic crosses around people's necks is like, I'm like, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. He's got this like gold chain, with a gigantic cross around his neck. That's, I saw that the other day actually on some dude driving a Trans Am, but anyway, I thought it was funny that he had actually found himself in a similar position that Plainview has, like completely emotionally ruined, beaten, broken, but unlike Plainview, in debt, and that's why he came around. You know what I
mean? And Plainview's the first step in him declaring victory over an enemy or an opponent, much the same as he does with the guy from Standard Oil, is to humiliate them.
Yeah.
So the first thing that he does is he gets Eli to say that he's a false prophet and that God is a superstition. And then once he's kind of got him onto this really sort of emotional peak, he turns around and he tells him that he's already drilled the bandy tract and that he doesn't need it anymore. Which, I mean, again, I know we've spoken a lot about Daniel Day-Lewis, but Paul Dano deserves a tremendous amount of props for that role. I mean, he's not only is he incredibly gifted as an actor generally, but he's very, very good in that role. And he also put up with an awful lot of fucking abuse. I mean, those slaps that that Daniel Day-Lewis gives him when he goes to confront him at the well, I mean, that is seriously hard.
Yeah.
I did read that apparently that was not rehearsed, and Paul Dano, like they had to kind of play nice afterwards for a bit, because I think Paul possibly didn't massively appreciate being smacked around as hard as he was. and having mud shoved in his mouth. By the way, another fun fact for you: the oil that was used in the movie is actually the same syrup they use for chocolate milkshakes at McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
It's like a food grade variant on that syrup that they used. Because obviously people are going to be drenched in it all the time, and they're going to have, the shit in their mouths and things like that. So they couldn't have actual oil. So yeah, it's I don't know if it tasted chocolate, but like I said, it's food grade, and it's a variant on the same syrup that they use for chocolate milkshakes at McDonald's.
So they all have diabetes now, probably.
Probably. That's why Daniel Day-Lewis quit acting.
Because he has diabetes from that film.
Yeah. No, he did. After this, obviously, he did Phantom Thread, also with Paul Thomas Anderson, which I also really enjoyed. It wasn't There Will Be Blood, but nothing is or will be. But it was a good movie.
It's true that he has retired, right? He's not doing it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, man.
He said that there wasn't anything left for him to do anymore. Like he didn't feel like there was anything that he could achieve. I mean, you never know. Someone might be able to pull him out of retirement. Scorsese might do another movie, and maybe he convinces him to play a role in it. I think if I'm not mistaken, with Gangs of New York, he had actually retired prior to that movie, and it was Scorsese that got him out of retirement the first time. So
that movie literally owes its success to him, because I felt that movie was pretty weak in general. But I thought that it's the only reason to see that movie is to see Daniel Day-Lewis act in it, really,
Yeah, no, I agree. It's weird because I really like Leonardo DiCaprio, but I feel like it's just unfortunate sometimes when certain people are cast across from somebody like Daniel Day-Lewis. You just get acted off the screen. And unfortunately, as capable as Leonardo DiCaprio is, he just can't hold a candle to Daniel Day-Lewis in that movie. He looks amateurish by comparison.
I think that Leo currently might be able to fare a little bit better than he did back then.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like after I started taking Leonardo DiCaprio seriously with The Departed, and I thought he was really good in that film, and that's when I started really paying attention to him as an actor.
Yeah, I remember seeing him the first time in Basketball Diaries, which I didn't enjoy. I know a lot of people did, but I thought it was a load of shit. Then I saw, my girlfriend at the time made me watch Romeo and Juliet, which I thought was one of the worst things I'd ever seen, and I suffered through Titanic. So I always thought he was a waste of space. And then I saw Catch Me If You Can, and I was like, gosh, this guy, he's got something going for him. And then kind of the same as you, there was that dual release of The Departed and Blood Diamond in 1 year. And after that, I feel like he's been on a real tear. He's been very, very good since then and very consistent. He's made one or two decisions in terms of what he would star in that I don't agree with. I mean, The Great Gatsby is a fucking pile of garbage. But for the most part, he's been very good. I thought Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was outstanding and probably the best role that he's ever played.
I love that movie. On the horror podcast I do, even though it's not a horror film, it's we covered that, and it's probably my favorite film of the year so far. It's even Brad Pitt, who I've never been a huge fan of his.
He was superb.
And even Brad Pitt, actually, did you see Ad Astra? Ad Astra, did you see that film?
No, I haven't.
I recommend it. He does a great job in that movie too. And I never thought I'd appreciate that guy, but I like him, and I mean, I've liked him in movies, but he's played like, two-dimensional characters. Like when he was in, I thought he was good in Snatch. All right. I'm not going to say that he was good in that movie because he was terrible in it, to be honest, but I enjoyed him as that character. And he was, I thought he was good as Tyler Durden in Fight Club because he was playing a two-dimensional reflection of someone else, of Ed Norton's actual person. He was like a reflection of him. And yeah, of course, he's the guy he dresses, whatever, like the way he does. He's like, the steroided version of someone's personality who generally has probably, self-esteem issues and things like that. But that's really been it for him as far as how I've enjoyed his work until recently. And now I feel like he's actually turned into like a real actor.
Yeah, I've had Ad Astra lined up here at home and to watch for quite a while now. And I've just not, for some reason, I've just not been able to get myself as far as doing it. So I'll take that under advisement and watch it. But I think he was superb on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to me is just absolutely phenomenal. I love it. I think it's incredible. It's an incredible movie, and it's one of Tarantino's best. And I am a big fan of Tarantino generally, so that's saying something.
Yeah, there was all of his skills are in display, and
Yeah,
someone I in the United States, as you know, we love cars, and there was a lot of really great cars in that film, and a lot of like car culture type stuff, which I really appreciated, and that's like one of the only things I really like. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. I do like California, but like the thing I like the most about California is being able to drive cars like out in the like the PCH and places like that,
yeah,
and that really is kind of front and center in that film, and I thought that was cool.
yeah. One thing that we need to discuss about There'll Be Blood, because I think it's such a crucial part of the movie, is the score. I don't know what your thoughts were on that, but much as the movie is my favorite movie of all time, I don't think I've ever heard a score that I've found as emotionally engaging and affecting as Johnny Greenwood's on this movie. I think it's perfect. I can't conceive of anything that would have suited this movie better than the soundtrack to There'll Be Blood.
Yeah, the score was great. It was definitely akin to like a Sergio Leone like type of score where it really creates, sets the tone for the movie. I mean, it doesn't sound like a Sergio Leone film, but you know how you can't imagine watching like The
Yeah,
Magnificent Seven or something like that without like this, or Once Upon a Time in the West or something has like this very iconic score to it. That's how I feel like the score for There Will Be Blood is. It's something that it just complements and creates an atmosphere for the film.
yeah, no, it's absolutely beautiful. They've had a couple of screenings, I believe, at the Royal Albert Hall over here in London, where they have where they have an orchestra and they do the score while the movie plays. And unfortunately, I've never gotten to watch it because it literally sells out like a year in advance when they do it. They always do it like for one night only. And generally speaking, both times I've always found out about it too late. But I did see Aliens done that way a couple of years ago, and I have to say it was one of the most enjoyable movie experiences of my life. Rounded out by the fact that right at the end of the movie, Sigourney Weaver came walking. First, there was this old guy that came on stage, and I said to my friend, "Who's this fucking blue rinse that suddenly walks on stage?" And then I was like, "Oh my god, that's James Cameron." And then straight after, this lady walks on stage, and I swear to God, I was like one of the girls from when the Beatles were at the peak of their
Oh yeah,
popularity. I literally was like screaming, "Oh my god, it's Ripley!"
that's awesome.
So, yeah, dude, I don't think I've ever heard a louder ovation than that woman received when she walked on that stage. Like, it was fucking unbelievable. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. But I would kill to see There Will Be Blood that way.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be great, man. That's I've never actually really. Well, that's I mean that's not entirely true. I saw Goblin perform the score for
Suspiria.
no Dawn of the Dead at Roadburn a few years ago. That was pretty cool. They played the film behind. Well, actually, it wasn't. It was more of just a live performance, and they played the film, so it was totally different. So yeah. And there's that one other guy, the other guy that was in Goblin, Guarini. I'm forgetting his first name, but Dante's Inferno, the silent film, at Salem Horror Fest last year. They showed the silent film, and he performed the score live, which was cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was very cool. What the hell's the guy's Guarini? Guarina? I don't know. I don't know why I'm forgetting his name right now, but yeah, he was. That was a very cool thing, and there was like literally like 50 people there because it was part of a festival, and there was like, literally, there's so many things going on at the same time, and it was in this small auditorium, and it was like in the middle of the day, and it was great. It was fun. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully we could do something like that again, at some point.
Fuck yes. Just one thing, or side note, purely because it was a member of Radiohead that did the score for that as well. But what did you think of the last of the Suspiria remake?
I you know I haven't really decided if I like that movie or not. I go back and forth. I'm not one of these people who's like comparing it to the original, because it's obviously two different movies. The
Yeah,
score I thought was awesome. Like I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of Radiohead, but I'm an admirer of the work that they do. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I mean I don't really listen to their records or anything, or I'm not. I don't get excited when I hear about them, but I admire the type of work they do, and there are definitely aspects to the individual members and what they can have accomplished in their careers too.
yeah. It was a weird one. I was massively excited about seeing it. And then I started reading a bunch of reviews, and people were like, "Oh, it's not as good as the original. It's boring, blah blah blah." So that kind of dropped my expectations hugely. Then there was a long delay in them releasing it here in the UK, and then when I finally watched it, I think my expectations had bottomed out to such a point that I fucking loved it. I really really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good movie. It's not as good as also out that year was Hereditary. It's not in the same league. I love Hereditary.
Yeah.
And I think Hereditary for me is one of the best horror movies made probably since The Shining. But it's I thought it was very good. I thought it was a really good movie, and same as There'll Be Blood. The score is just stunning. I wouldn't call myself the biggest fan of Radiohead either, but I think they're incredible musicians.
Yeah.
There's no taking that away from them.
Yeah, I admire them. Same thing with Tool. It's like I don't listen to Tool, but it's like I can see like the accomplishment and what they've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a band that always comes up where it's like, I always think it's funny, that band. Like they, people are, oh, you don't like Tool? Like, how come you don't like Tool? I'm like, well, they're they're not my cup of tea, man. It's like, it's, what do you want from me? It's just, I own a couple of Tool records. I remember when ISIS toured with Tool, that was pretty cool, but it's just not something I'd really. I mean, I did listen to them when they came out, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I saw them play a few times, but they're like a bro Grateful Dead in some ways, It's
I think that's a good description. Tool for me is weird. I didn't like them when they came out because when they came out, I was so gripped by death metal and black metal that to me all other forms of music were fake and for the weak. And then my music taste very drastically expanded in the years since. And so when the new Tool album came out, I decided to give it a chance, and I was quite surprised by it. Although that being said, I have since the last time I listened to it, which was probably about 2-3 weeks after it came out, I have yet to go back to it and listen to it end to end.
I can't get through some of their later records, really, But
it's just one of those things where there's so many other things I would rather be listening to that it just doesn't feature very highly. It's kind of like Metallica, Beyond and Justice for All. I don't think there's and Black Album because of the age that I was at when it came out. But there's nothing that they've brought out in the last 15 years that I've listened to more than once. It's not terrible, but it's not. It just doesn't do anything for me. I've spoken recently on my podcast about the innovation curve, and I feel like, especially in death and black metal, the standard for what's great, like the benchmark for what's truly great, is being set so high not even just like every year, every fucking month, by the sounds of things, that a lot of stuff that would have been great 20 years ago or 25 years ago just doesn't cut it anymore. You listen to it and you go, there's 10 other bands I'd rather listen to than this.
Yeah, that's true, man. I feel like extreme music in general has always been very innovative, especially since like the turn of the century. I think in the last 20 years, that's really where you find creativity,
Agree. 100% agree.
Yeah, I feel like people are more open to incorporating other things. It's not as regimented as it might have been in the 90s. Like death metal was like very purist and black metal was very like elitist, and there was like a sort of emphasis on a sort of orthodox approach to creating the music. You know what I mean? And I think now uh, there's more of a bandwidth of acceptable influences that could be incorporated into both death metal and black metal, and it's looked at as innovation instead of not being cult or not being pure or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm glad is for the most part died a death as well. Every so often, a friend of mine and myself, both of us are usually into hi-fi, so we'll fire up either one of our systems and we'll sit listening to a lot of old stuff. And that kind of Beauty and the Beast, doom death vibe that was relatively popular in the mid '90s. Where you kind of had the female like operatic vocals with a death growl. That's one trend I'm glad has died to death, because that music uniformly was fucking dreadful.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. I mean, honestly, doom in general has never really been my bag. I mean, there's obviously there's the bands I think that are great. Like I put Evoken in that category as being a great doom band. Funeral. I'm not a big Sun fan, unfortunately. Everyone loves that band, but I'm not. I'll put them on like in the background if I'm like cleaning the house or something like that. But it's not like. Yeah. So I find it to be very derivative of Earth, a band that I really liked back in the early '90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like not My Bloody Valentine, My Dying Bride, is, in my opinion, one of the bands that really like crosses death metal and doom perfectly. And like some of the early Cathedral stuff, I really dig. But in general, I'm very selective about the kind of doom I listen to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like for me, metal is we've spoken about this before. It needs to be confrontational and it needs to be aggressive. Otherwise, I'd listen. There's a bunch of other music I'd rather listen to. Like when there is a certain kick I want when I listen to metal, and it's definitely not. Morgan from Marduk said this or described it perfectly once. Someone sitting by the side of a lake looking sad. That's exactly how I feel. It's like if I hear sniveling in music, I'm immediately not interested.
More recently, I've really been appreciating the kind of like the punk influence in some metal. You know what I mean? Like I've been listening a lot to earlier, like Venom and Bathory and Celtic Frost, Hellhammer, like some of the. I've been going really far back, Motorhead, into like oldies, and
yeah.
And I find like it's even, in some of the material I've been writing, it's starting to surface in a little bit of that too. Like I've been kind of going into this more raw direction with like songwriting and stuff. And I don't know if this is going to become like Tombs material, but it might be something I do with like some other type of thing where it's like this kind of like Hellhammer like vibe to it,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely a step up in terms of aggression on the stuff that I heard on Monarchy of Shadows. Versus the Grand Annihilation, and I said to you before, like I can hear strains of bands like Melakesh on some of the new music, alongside that Tombs sound that mixes in things like Fields of the Nephilim, etc. And I think it works very, very well for you, mate.
Thank you.
And I truly believe people need to go with what's inside of you rather than overthinking it too much. And it definitely feels to me on the new Tombs music that it's more authentic in the sense that it came out of what you were thinking or what you were feeling at the time, rather than sitting down thinking, I'm going to write a Tombs album.
Yeah, that's true, man. I think like Grand Annihilation is definitely a low point in the band's career. And actually, I think tomorrow the new record gets announced. I think tomorrow's Tuesday.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so. It's funny, man. I normally am way on top of all this stuff where, like, I know all the dates, but just the lockdown and the lack of touring has, like, really put me off to things, man. It's, I talked about this earlier where, like, I had a conversation with a journalist friend who Season of Mist hired to update the bio and everything. So we talked on the phone, and I'm just like, what? Who fucking cares, man? It's like, like I get it. I understand you have to care, but like part of me is like, we're not going to go on tour. I don't know when we're going to be doing anything. So why do this? But that's just like this weird fatalistic thing that I'm in right now. And then we shot photos over the weekend, press photos, and I'm just like, fucking why? Like, who knows when we're going to even be performing live again.
Yeah.
And to me, and I guess that's like the difference between the guy at the label or someone who's like working the business end of things and me, the guy who goes out on the adventures on the road. And that's even more so than making records, like the live experience is where it's at for me. And that's like, when that doesn't exist, I feel like nothing really exists. You know what I mean? Because there's like, that's like a tangible, like real thing that you do, and you communally do this thing. And the record is done. The record's part of the past. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
So I don't know. It's like a weird vibe, and that's what I mean. Like, so I think, and don't hold me to this, because this episode's actually going up today. Whenever I do these things, they go up right away. So tomorrow,
awesome.
Tuesday, the 1st of September, I believe a song is going to be released, and I also believe they're going to start the press cycle for the record, which is
yeah.
I mean, great, but there's nothing to really promote besides you can buy this record somewhere, and
yeah.
There's no tours, there's no festivals, there's no local shows. There's like nothing to announce along with the release of the album, which is kind of a drag,
You can do a quarantine jam and cover Seven Gates of Hell by Venom.
Well, actually, you know what, man? You mentioned that we are doing the one thing that actually is going to happen is at the end of September is we're recording a live video, but we're not. The disclaimer is this: when they asked us to do this, I was like, well, look, the last thing I want to do is make one of these like pandemic videos in a practice space with really rough production value, so that in 5 years, if there's anything left of our civilization and people are like back to relatively a normal life, they see this thing and they're like, oh yeah, man, I remember that. That was like 2020. I want to forget that fucking year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something that it would actually have some longevity, that would be a performance cut in with actual production and have like professional sound and things like that. So that's what we're shooting at the end of September. It's we're going to like a space. It's going to be lit. There's going to be imagery and B-roll cut in, and there's going to be multiple camera angles, and there's going to be a multi-track recording of the live performance that's going to be mixed by Sanford Parker, who's everyone knows who he is probably. He's like he actually did our All Empires Fall record, but he's done, Knock Mystium, Unearthly Trance, tons of bands,
Yeah.
He's in Mirrors of Psychic Warfare, that band with Scott Kelly. And, he's a good friend, but also a very, very talented engineer. So he's going to be mixing it. And, there's going to be, I hope it turns out well. It's the closest thing we're going to be doing to performing live. And but it's going to be something nice to look at, though, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I was about to say, it sounds like it'll be something different as well to the standard quarantine jam, which is a very good thing in my opinion. And again, I will say this, just circling back to the Grand Annihilation. I know you're not a fan, but Shadows at the End of the World is a fucking insanely good song. I absolutely love that song.
Thank you, but that still didn't come out the way I wanted it to. It's like that. It's and I don't want to point fingers, but the drummer on that record was the wrong guy to be recording that record with us. You know what I mean? And he just I think that if the current lineup had recorded that song, it would have came out with a lot more life in it. But whatever.
Yeah,
I'm glad you like it, though. I should just take that and let it go at that. You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean, though, mate. It's you have a competition in you as well. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I just want to keep doing good stuff. Or stuff that at least that I feel good about. I don't know whether or not people I've been at this long enough, man, where it's like I can't hang my hat on like what other people like. It has to be what I like, and
Yeah.
I have to feel satisfied with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, well, I'm very much looking forward to Year again, and what I think let's give it a couple of months, maybe to Nero the album coming out, but you must definitely come on Into the Necrosphere again as well.
Yeah, man, totally, anytime. And it hasn't been announced yet, but at this stage, there's probably about 5 or 6 people listening to this thing. So, so I'm going to say the release date of the album is November 20th, which that's only a few months away, and you'll be able to get it. I don't know if there's any record stores open near you, or there will be, but you can order it directly from Season of Mist, or you can probably get it from Holy Mountain, which is our merch guy. He takes care of all the web store stuff, or download it illegally on one of the many outlets. You can do that, and that's cool if you want to do that. But if you're going to do that, buy a T-shirt or something, so we don't completely get ripped off.
Yeah. I'll buy a T-shirt, because I have to say one thing that I do like about Season of Mist is they put out everything on high res. So when they the music service that I use is called Qobuz, and if you're a hi-fi nerd, it's specifically for people with decent stereo setups. And all of their releases now come out in high res, so they sound fucking fantastic. Completely. None of the kind of usual MP3 compression and that fucking disgusting, empty, dead sound that you get on Spotify. I'll be listening to it on that, and I'll definitely buy a T-shirt.
Oh, thanks, man. I'll, if we ever get out to England at some point, hopefully next year, I'll give you a couple of shirts if you want. Hoodie, whatever.
Fuck yes.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Season of Mist is they got it together when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think, and it's cool that they're based in Europe, which is that's always been like a frontier for us in some ways. Is our presence in Europe, and I hope hopefully that changes. And they're French, which is that's fine.
Yeah. So you have French fries, not freedom fries, in other words.
I don't have any I never eat that stuff, but yeah, if I do eat a fried potato, it's a French fry. Yeah.
Yeah, not a freedom fry. That I don't know why I randomly thought about that, but you mentioned George Bush at the start of the conversation, and it reminded me of that. How the fuck did they ever think that was a great idea? Like, are we going to really get back at the French now? We're not
God, man. Well, yeah, that had to do with France not agreeing with us.
Yeah, no, I know. Didn't want to go.
Yeah,
didn't want to join the coalition of the willing.
It's such a fucking passive aggressive bullshit, weak statement, man. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm embarrassed by a lot of that stuff, and it sucks. But hey, this is where I live, and unfortunately, it takes a large swath of different types of people with varying ideas to fucking exist in this country, man. Yeah. And what are you gonna do about it? You could fucking vote. You can riot, maybe.
Totally
maybe
agree.
Blow up a couple of state buildings or something. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. And I'm looking forward to jumping back on the show when we can talk about the new record and everything. That's cool.
For sure. Yeah, no, for sure. Always great talking to you. And I always think about this, like when I've had a couple of conversations with somebody, they always become more fun, because the more you know the person, the more you can fuck around a bit and bullshit and maybe dig into stuff that you're not 100% sure you should go into the first few times. So no, it's been a blast, man. Thank you very much for having me. I love talking about There Will Be Blood, as you can imagine. So
yeah,
there was a period of time where I think almost every single one of my podcast episodes would at some point go, involve discussion about the movie. So when there was a chance to do a whole episode just purely dedicated to it, I was like, fuck yes.
Nah, it's a great film, man. I had a lot of fun talking about it.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much.
All right.
And hopefully we'll catch up again very soon.
All right, man. Enjoy your day. Take care.
You too, brother. Take care.